The morning I found her, the fog hadn't lifted yet off Route 9. I was coming back from my sister Pauline's place. She lives out past the old grain co-op 12 miles from nowhere. And I almost missed her entirely. Just a shape in the ditch. Dark coat, one arm stretched out like she was reaching for something she'd never get to. I pulled over. I don't know why. 63 years on this earth and I've learned to trust that pull in my chest when something's wrong. My late husband Gerald used to say I had a sixth sense. I'd tell him it wasn't a sixth sense, it was just paying attention. Most people don't pay attention anymore. She was conscious. Barely. Young woman, maybe 26, 27. Cheek pressed into the mud, hair matted, one hand curved around her belly. That's when I saw it. She was pregnant. Visibly, obviously pregnant. 7 months at least. I crouched down beside her and she flinched. I'm not going to hurt you, I said. My name is Eloise. Can you tell me yours? She looked at me for a long moment. Like she was deciding whether I was safe. Like she'd learned that most people weren't. Nadia, she whispered. And then she said something that stopped my heart cold. It was Delia. She said if I told anyone, she'd make sure no one believed me. I didn't know who Delia was yet. I didn't know anything yet. But I wrapped my coat around her shoulders, helped her to my car, and drove. I did not take her home first. I want to be clear about that, because later, there would be people who questioned my decisions. I took her straight to Mercy General, 3 miles up Route 9, and I sat in that waiting room for 4 hours while they checked her over, ran tests on the baby, made sure she was stable. The baby was fine. A boy, strong heartbeat, they said. Nadia cried when they told her. Not happy crying. The kind of crying that's been stored up for a very long time. While she was being treated, I stepped into the hallway and called my son. My son Fletcher is 41 years old. He works in commercial real estate, just like his father did. He is not a bad man, but he is, and I say this with the particular grief of a mother who has watched it happen, a man who avoids conflict the way some people avoid bad weather, by simply pretending it isn't coming. He answered on the 3rd ring. Mom? Fletcher, I said. Who is Nadia? Silence. The particular silence of someone who knows exactly what you're asking and is deciding how much to tell you. She's Delia's younger sister? Why? There it was. The name again. I found her on the side of Route 9 this morning. She's at Mercy General. She's 7 months pregnant and she's been hurt. Another silence. Fletcher, who is Delia to you? He exhaled slowly. Delia Marsh. We've been seeing each other, Mom. For about 8 months. I was going to tell you. You were going to tell me. I repeated. Mom, this isn't the time. You're right, I said. It isn't. Come to Mercy General. I hung up. I went back to Nadia's room and sat in the chair beside her bed, and she told me things slowly, haltingly, like someone pulling thorns out of their own skin. It hurt her to say it, but she said it. Delia Marsh was 34 years old, the older of 2 daughters born to a family in Callaway County. Their father, a man named Theodore Marsh, had died 18 months prior, leaving behind a farmstead, 2 rental properties, a modest investment portfolio, and a will that split everything equally between both daughters. Delia had not been pleased by equally. Delia had, in fact, spent the 18 months since her father's death systematically dismantling her younger sister's life. First, she'd suggested Nadia was unstable. Grief, she told relatives. Nadia had always been fragile, hadn't she? Nadia had always needed more help than the rest of them? She spread this quietly, the way you spread a rumor that's designed to look like concern. By the time Nadia realized what was happening, half the family already saw her through Delia's lens. Then Delia had found a boyfriend for Nadia. His name was Garrett. I recognized the name when Nadia said it. And that recognition sat in my chest like a stone. Because Garrett was my son Fletcher's business partner. And suddenly, 8 months of Fletcher seeing someone, and not telling me, clicked into terrible focus. Garrett and Nadia had dated for 5 months. In that time, Garrett had moved into Nadia's apartment, the one she owned outright, part of her inheritance. He had slowly, carefully positioned himself as the manager of her financial affairs. She'd been grieving, exhausted, overwhelmed by probate. He'd seemed like help. He was not help. By the time Nadia discovered she was pregnant, Garrett had already transferred management of her rental property income to a joint account that he controlled. He'd had her sign documents she hadn't fully read. During a weekend, she'd been sick with what the doctor called a stomach bug. Delia had been there that weekend. Delia had made her tea. Nadia paused when she got to that part. Looked at her hands. I didn't understand it at the time, she said quietly. But afterward, when I started putting it together, I think she put something in it. The tea. I was so sick. I couldn't stand up. I signed whatever he put in front of me. Where is Garrett now? I asked. I don't know. I told him I knew what he'd done 2 days ago, and Delia. She called me. She said I needed to stop talking. She said if I caused problems, she'd go to the lawyers and say I was mentally unfit, that I'd been unstable since our father died, that I couldn't manage the estate. She said she had affidavits. Nadia's voice was very steady now, the way voices get when the person speaking them has already moved past the fear into something colder. I left. I took my car. I was going to drive to my aunt's. I don't know what happened. I think I must have blacked out. The car went off the road. I sat there for a moment with all of that. Then I said, I'm going to make a phone call. You rest. I went back into the hallway and I called my sister Pauline. Pauline is 70 years old and she spent 32 years as a paralegal before she retired. She is the sharpest person I have ever known and she has no patience for nonsense of any kind. When I told her what Nadia had told me, she was quiet for exactly 4 seconds. Get the name of her father's estate attorney, Pauline said, and don't let her sign anything. She's in a hospital bed, Pauline. People sign things in hospital beds. Get the name. I got the name. Fletcher arrived at Mercy General around 2 in the afternoon. He came into the hallway to talk to me, and he looked exactly the way he used to look when he was 12 years old, and I'd caught him in a lie. Not guilty exactly, but aware, and tired of being aware. How much did you know? I asked. Mom. Fletcher. How much? He ran his hand over his face. I knew Garrett had taken over managing some of her finances. Delia said it was because Nadia was overwhelmed, that she needed the support. I didn't ask more than that. She is 7 months pregnant with your business partner's child, I said. She was found unconscious in a ditch this morning, and you didn't ask more than that. He couldn't look at me. Delia told you she was unstable, I said. It wasn't a question. He nodded. There it was. The same story Delia had told everyone. And my son who I raised, who I watched learn to walk in our kitchen, who I set up with through fevers and nightmares and broken hearts, had believed it because believing it was easier than asking questions. I thought about what I wanted to say to him. I thought about it carefully. Then I said the only thing that mattered right then. You are going to help me fix this, or you are going to have to live with the fact that you didn't. He looked up. What do you need me to do? He said. Pauline drove to the hospital the next morning with a yellow legal pad and a voice recorder. She sat with Nadia for 3 hours. She documented everything. Dates, account numbers from memory, the names of documents Nadia had signed, the name of the doctor who treated her stomach illness, the weekend Delia had been present. She was methodical. She was unhurried. She asked the same questions in different orders to make sure the answers were consistent. They were. Meanwhile, I was doing my own work. My late husband Gerald had a saying, the fastest way to understand a person's intentions is to look at their paperwork. He'd learned that in 30 years of commercial real estate, you can lie with words. Paperwork is harder to walk back. I knew the attorney who'd handled Theodore Marsh's estate. His name was Frederick Holden, and he'd gone to the same church as my husband for 15 years. I called him. I want to be careful here about what I say and what I don't say. I won't pretend I called him purely out of the goodness of my heart. I called him because I needed information and because I believed, and still believe, that he had a professional and moral obligation to his client's estate that was being violated. What he told me, carefully and within the limits of what he could disclose, was enough. Nadia's signature appeared on a document she almost certainly didn't understand, witnessed by Garrett, filed 6 months ago, that redirected a significant portion of her rental income into a management trust. The trustee was Garrett. The secondary trustee, listed as backup, was Delia. Frederick Holden was not a stupid man. He had concerns. He had not known what to do with those concerns, because Nadia had, at the time, seemed compliant. Now, with what I was telling him, he had a clearer picture. She was incapacitated when she signed, I said. She was deliberately made ill. A long silence. That is a very serious allegation, he said. Yes, I said, it is. I'd like to discuss next steps. Delia appeared at the hospital on day 3. I had been expecting her. Pauline had been expecting her. We discussed what to do when she came, because she would come. People like Delia always come when they sense control slipping. They come to reassert it. She was beautiful. I want to say that, not to excuse anything, but because I think it matters to understand how she operated. Delia Marsh was tall, polished, the kind of woman who occupies a room by standing still. She had the practiced warmth of someone who learned early that warmth was a tool. She came to Nadia's room and I was already there, sitting in the chair. She stopped in the doorway. You must be Fletcher's mother, she said, and her smile was perfectly calibrated. Friendly, just slightly surprised, nothing threatening. Eloise, isn't it? I've heard so much about you. Sit down, Delia, I said. The smile stayed on. I just came to check on my sister. I was so worried when I heard what happened. Sit down. Something shifted behind her eyes. Very small. Very fast. She sat. Nadia was watching from the bed. She hadn't said anything. I'd asked her beforehand not to if she could manage it. I told her, let me. I'd spoken with Frederick Holden, I said. The smile did not disappear. But it changed. The quality of it changed. He's reviewing the trust document. He's also spoken with the physician who treated Nadia 6 months ago, the weekend she signed it. Nadia's doctor here at Mercy General has noted in her chart the trace indicators of a substance consistent with a sedative. I watched Delia's face. You should also know that my sister has documented Nadia's account of events in detail, and that documentation is currently with my attorney. This is, Delia started. I'm not finished. I kept my voice even. My hands were still. I had spent 2 days being furious, and I had used all of it up, and what was left was something much quieter and much more effective. Garrett has already been asked to step down from his trustee position pending the review. Fletcher has terminated their business partnership, effective this week, and I want you to understand clearly that whatever you plan to tell people about your sister's stability, that story has already been answered. Delia looked at me. She looked at Nadia. She looked at me again. You have no idea what you're getting involved in, she said, and her voice had dropped the warmth entirely now. This was the real voice. Flat and certain, the voice of someone who has never been properly stopped before. I found your sister in a ditch, I said. On a cold morning, alone, 7 months pregnant. I got involved the moment I stopped my car. She left without another word. I won't say it was over then because it wasn't. These things are never over quickly. There were attorneys, and there were hearings, and there was a very difficult period where Nadia had to stay somewhere safe. She stayed with Pauline, in the house past the grain co-op, and there were nights I didn't sleep well, and mornings I woke up angry all over again. But I will tell you what happened. The trust document was successfully contested on the grounds that Nadia had been incapacitated at signing. It took 7 months. Frederick Holden cooperated fully with the review. The rental properties were returned to Nadia's sole management. Delia's attorney attempted to file the mental competency challenge she threatened. It went nowhere. Pauline's documentation, combined with the medical record at Mercy General, and the testimony of 2 family members who came forward once they understood what had actually been happening, was more than enough. Garrett settled out of court. I will not say what the settlement was because that is Nadia's business, not mine. Fletcher. And this is the part I thought about for a long time before deciding how to tell it. Fletcher did something I didn't expect. He didn't just terminate the partnership with Garrett. He contacted 2 of the other women in Garrett's past, women whose names came up during the legal proceedings. He listened to what they had to say. He helped connect them with Nadia's attorney. He was not obligated to do that. He did it anyway. I don't say this to rehabilitate him completely. I say it because I believe in accuracy. He had been willfully blind, and then he chose to see. That is not the same as never having been blind, but it is not nothing either. Nadia's son was born on a Tuesday in October. 7 pounds 4 ounces. She named him Theodore, after her father. She asked me to be there at the hospital when he was born. She didn't have anyone else she wanted in the room. Not from her family. Not from that chapter of her life. Just Pauline and me, 2 old women in a hospital waiting room, drinking terrible coffee and not saying much because there wasn't much that needed to be said. When they let me come in and hold him, he looked up at me the way newborns do. Unfocused, searching, deeply certain that there is something worth looking for. I thought about that morning on Route 9. The fog. The shape in the ditch. The pull in my chest that said stop. I am 63 years old. I have buried a husband, raised a son, paid a mortgage alone, sat with my sister through her diagnosis and her recovery, grown a garden every spring that the deer eat half of. I have learned that life does not ask you if you are ready before it puts something in your path. It just puts it there. What you do next is the only thing that's yours. Nadia moved to a rental house 20 minutes from Pauline, close enough to call for anything, far enough to have her own life. She went back to school in January. She'd always wanted to finish her degree. Landscape architecture. She told me it felt right, studying how things grow. I still drive Route 9 most weeks, coming and going from Pauline's. I always slow down a little when I pass the spot, not out of sadness, out of something else. A kind of recognition, maybe, that the most important mornings rarely look important when they begin. That one just looked like fog, and a shape in the ditch, and a choice. If this story stayed with you, leave a comment below and let me know. I read every single one. And if you know someone who needed to hear this today, share it with them. We never know who's driving alone on a quiet road, hoping someone will stop. I've been thinking about something Pauline said the night after Delia left that hospital room. We were in the parking lot, getting into our cars, and she stopped with her hand on the door and said, "You know what the worst part is? Nobody stopped her sooner because she was always so reasonable about it." That word has stayed with me. Reasonable. Delia never screamed. She never threatened anyone in a room full of witnesses. She moved quietly. She used the right language. She positioned everything she did as concern. And because of that, she operated for 18 months without anyone pushing back. Not the relatives. Not Frederick Holden. Not my son. Not Garrett. Certainly not me. Because I didn't even know she existed until a cold morning on Route 9. People who cause this kind of damage rarely look like they're causing damage. That's the first thing I would tell anyone listening to this. The harm that undoes a person's life rarely arrives loudly. It arrives with a cup of tea and a sympathetic expression. But here is what I've also come to believe, just as firmly. The same quietness that allows that kind of harm to move through the world also belongs to the people who stop it. Pauline didn't stop Delia by making speeches. She sat in a hospital room with a legal pad and she asked the same questions in different orders for 3 hours. I didn't stop her by confronting her publicly. I made phone calls. I read documents. I said what I knew, plainly, to the one person whose professional duty required him to listen. Nadia didn't need a rescuer. She needed someone to take her seriously at the exact moment when the people who should have were choosing not to. I think about that a lot when I hear people say they didn't know what to do. Fletcher didn't know what to do. I understand that now in a way I couldn't, fully, when I was standing in that hospital hallway furious at him. He had been handed a version of reality that had been carefully constructed by someone he trusted, and he'd accepted it without pressure testing it. Because pressure testing things is uncomfortable. It requires you to consider that you might have been wrong. That is hard for most people. It was hard for Fletcher, but he did it. Eventually. He sat with the discomfort and he chose to do the harder thing anyway. That is not a small thing. I want to believe it cost him something real, and I want to believe it changed him in a way that lasts. What I know about cause and effect, from 63 years of watching how things unfold, is this. People tend to receive back in time what they put into the world. Not immediately, not always obviously. But the accounting does get done. Delia had spent 18 months building something on a foundation of someone else's grief and someone else's trust. When that foundation was examined honestly, there was nothing under it. The whole structure came apart. Nadia named her son Theodore. She's studying landscape architecture. She told me it felt right, learning how things grow. I think she was right about that too. The morning I found her, I was just a woman on a road who stopped her car. I didn't know what I was stopping for. I didn't have a plan. I just knew that there was a shape in the ditch and that I couldn't drive past it. That's what I hope people take from this. Not that you have to be extraordinary. Not that you have to know what to do before you stop. Just that you stop. That you take what you find seriously. That you make the calls. That you sit in the uncomfortable truth long enough to do something useful with it. The rest, more often than you'd expect, has a way of following.